first question that came up for me is, how did you come to develop entire class for this region? Is it a personal interest, or is it about you had some experience with you in the classrooms, or how did it come?
I think it's both. First of all, personal experiences. I had some severe head damage, and with also including whiplash, and so that was one part, and that also brought me into cranial. So that was very personal. But then when I became instructor teaching CS1 and then CS2, I had a lot of study groups, and I could see that a lot of students were struggling with the cranial base. And at the same time, when you were beginning to read that the cranial base is such an important area for the body and for the function of the cranial sacral system, I was like, okay, I really begin to study it to try to find out what's the problems of the students. How could we learn something new about this? And yeah, so that was the beginning of it.
But I can imagine what you, because when I started with my CST, the cranial base is really, there's so many steps and you have to focus on so many things, and then so many things can happen.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit what we will come in contact in the class, because when I watched your video, your introduction video, you were talking about several different levels, superficial, and there's something visceral. So when we are in class, will we stay in contact with the cranial base? Will we move to the body, or how can how will the techniques look like?
Yeah, I think that one thing that will be very the primary idea of the class is that we have 4 days that will focus a lot on the cranial base, but we're going to learn the cranial base from a whole body perspective. So when you, if you look like Oplecher and how he read about it in the Brown Book, it's like saying that the cranial base, you can sit in the cranial base, and then you see some very experienced therapists, they sit in the cranial base and different body parts are reacting from that perspective. And we want to learn that so that we understand that the cranial base is like it's like a meeting point for all the fascial systems in the body. And it of course contains many levels of restrictions. So what we are going to do is that we are going to learn how the different whole body patterns relates to the cranial base. So we can see that if we have a structural problem, a spine problem, a visceral problem, whatever, we can relate that to the cranial base so that when we touch the cranial base, we understand, this is this type of problem, and it makes it much easier to treat the cranial base, and we can do it also with less force.
Yes. I just get the impression that in the cranial 2 and 3 classes, our teachers are doing some experiments when people are watching the, oh, now I need the new word, the Sutu Sphenobasilaris.
Yeah.
And when someone is moving or pushing and how the body is reacting. And now we will bring everything to the cranial base, looking how it had to react, or how it did react, how it reacts with our treatments, what the body gets new informations, and the informations from the body coming to the cranial base.
Yeah. So we can say we will learn how structures from outside, from the body, comes to the cranial base and how it relates to the restrictions we feel. And we will also learn how fascia from the inside, the dura mater, comes from inside of the skull, and how that affects the cranial base. Because when we go to certain types of clients we see in the clinic, there we also have a group of clients coming where it can even be difficult to touch the cranial base. It's so sensitive. Be careful how you touch. I don't want my head back, and we can hardly touch. Why is that? And we want to understand also these categories of clients coming, and how we actually can treat that in a very safe and gentle way.
So that would have been one of my questions. You already started to answer. So that's one of the categories of clients that could be, or that would really benefit from this new techniques we will learn in the class. You already told about the headache you had for your experiences.
Yeah.
Whiplash for sure would be something, or perhaps concussion patients.
Yeah. And we will also look at in what cases are we using more the cranial base as like a starting from the treatment, and sometimes how we will actually always in a cranial treatment use it for integration, and that integration of all that had happened in the session can maybe just be a few minutes, or it can be a little bit more, depending on what was coming up in the treatment.
So if I'm just new in the cranial sacral world, like there will be perhaps participants who had just finished now craniosacral 3. You think it's possible to feel all those connections or to get in contact with this?
Yes, we can say one major aim of the class is that we are going to spend a lot on hands-on experiences, so that that's the real focus. To the theory, we say that we use the minimum amount of knowledge and we use the minimum amount of pressure. So when we go to with the minimum amount of knowledge, we are not going into extensive whole body fascial systems. We just want to know exactly what we need for our hands-on experience. So we will spend the major amount of time with hands-on, so that everyone will learn to palpate this. And then at the end of the class, it's like you have a map of the cranial base. So when you touch it, your hands recognize this map and say, this is this type. And now I maybe know a better way how to treat the cranial base if I understand which system is involved.
Also sounds like for ones like me, my craniosacral classes are now, I think, more than a decade ago. I can really benefit for getting in touch again with the structure and benefiting from getting a lot more experience in my hands and making it more clear and more precise, more detailed with my hands.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the same time, soft, that we can say that sometimes when we work with a platform in the cranial base that people have been struggling with, that it creates pressure in the fingers of the therapist. And some clients might say, oh, that's really nice to have a pressure in my neck. And then comes the next client and it will be a nightmare to have that pressure in your neck. So how do you understand this difference? And how can we actually work without getting that pressure in the cranial base, and often find a soft and safe way to a release.
Sounds great. Also for me, so I'm sure I will be the next to register. Hopefully not the only one.
Yeah.
No. I'm just thinking. There was one more question I got, and it was, what do you think that the people can take home as a take-home message from the class? But I think there had been already a lot of answers about this.
Yeah, we have been teaching the class now for 10 years, and when it was introduced, like in Ireland, Holland, Switzerland, Russia, and Singapore, Australia, many places it has been taken in as part of the education now. And we also teach the class at the Institute in Florida, where a lot of up-lecture teachers have taken the class. And one of the feedback is that it's going to change. People say it changed my practice. I see the craniosacral system with the cranial base in a different way now. It gave me options in my daily treatments that I didn't have before, and that has changed a little bit. We work a lot with how do we switch between being very local in our hands and then shift to that understand the global fascial system we're actually touching. And that makes the releases more profound and at the same time quite gentle. So that has been some of the main thing that has been reported back from from students, from teachers who have been taking the class. So I hope that will be the same for the Austrian students.
I hope too. And it sounds like this. So thanks a lot, Thomas, for coming to Austria next March. And we will hopefully work all together on this I'm already curious about it at the moment. So what I will learn, what my hands will feel and find. And so thanks for coming to us, and thanks for your time today, giving us a little bit of impressions what to come.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to see you in Austria.